This is a Spoken Arts presentation. Woolly Mammoth. It was cold. The earth had been covered by snow and ice for a very long time. The young woolly mammoth plodded around in search of food. The cold did not bother the creature. Its thick woolly coat protected it from even the harshest of weather. Today, the youngster plucked a few leaves from a willow tree. The best leaves were higher up on the branches. It was too much of an effort to reach up and strip them off. He looked around. There was some food on the bushes around about him. He turned to these. He trumpeted a greeting to another mammoth, which fed close by. His neighbor called back. The herd was scattered over the plains. Soon, they would be coming together to move south as winter approached. As the mammoths browsed contentedly, woolly rhinoceroses grazed on the grass. Something inside the young mammoth told him that the time for migration was drawing near. This would be his first journey south without his mother. No new leaves appeared on the trees, so he had to move around to find enough to eat. Suddenly, everything went dark. The mammoth looked up to see the first snows of winter drifting from the skies. Within minutes, the trees and bushes were covered with a blanket of white. During the night, heavy snow fell, the flakes clinging to the creature's woolly coats. As dawn broke, the older members of the herd woke first. They were restless and disturbed the rest of the herd. The young mammoth knew that it would soon be time to move south. The snow lay thick on the branches. The older members set off, led by an elderly bull. They fed as they went. The young mammoth was on his own. His mother now had other young to watch. He recognized her as she guided a much younger and smaller offspring on its way. They were surrounded by hills. Snow lay everywhere. It had settled on the branches of the willows. The mammoth used his tusks and trunk to shake the snow so he could feed. The young mammoth heard the familiar call of a woolly rhinoceros. He looked around him. There were many woolly rhinoceroses tearing at the rough grass. They were heading south too. The snow showers came more often. There was less sun, and it was colder. The temperature seldom rose above freezing point. Overhead, large flocks of birds were also on their way south. Sometimes they landed on the trees to look for seeds. They were noisy and quarrelsome. The herd of mammoths was now several hundred strong. They stopped for short periods, feeding on the fir and willow trees which sprang from the snow-covered landscape. The elderly bull leading the herd was having trouble keeping the animals together. The young mammoth heard a terrible noise. The leader had been challenged by a younger male. They were locked in combat. The young mammoth looked on from a safe distance. The rest of the herd had stopped. None tried to interfere in the battle. The conflict was brief. The old bull fell to the ground exhausted. He moaned gently and then was quiet. The challenger prodded the creature with his tusks. There was no response. The new leader trumpeted loudly to celebrate his success. The younger males assembled around him, answering his calls. The older members were more cautious, keeping their distance. The new leader moved more quickly. Competition for the few leaves was increasing, and it was first come, first served. The young, agile mammoths did better than their older relatives. Already, some of these were dying, their bodies lying stiffly in the snow. The herd was startled by a loud noise. Woolly mammoths and rhinoceroses stopped feeding. In the distance, two woolly rhinoceroses were engaged in combat. They were fighting over the sparse grass. The battle became intense. As if this were some kind of signal, many other rhinos started to fight. Although the young mammoth moved nearer, he didn't get too close in case the rhinos attacked him. One old rhino fell to the ground. It writhed for a few minutes and then was still. The trek south was uneventful, except for the occasional fight. Food became even scarcer. More old mammoths and rhinos died. The young mammoth passed many dead bodies. Several weeks later, they arrived at their winter home. The winds blew and the snows came. The young mammoth knew that he was old enough to find a mate. Already he was looking around. Like him, all the other young males were thinking of mates. Winter passed very slowly. Eventually, the weather became warmer. The sun could be seen for longer periods as the days progressed. It was time for the mammoths to move back north again. The males already had their eyes on the few young females in the herd. Fighting for them would come soon enough. Although the young mammoth didn't look forward to combat, he knew this was the way it was. The journey north took many weeks. There was more food, and the creatures fed frequently. The trees were showing their new coat of summer green. The woolly mammoth knew from the landmarks that they were nearing their summer quarters. He trumpeted with excitement, a call which was taken up by many of the other creatures. He tried to make his way to the front of the herd. Because he was young, his place was near the back. The older mammoths prevented him from overtaking them. At last, they were home. There was much calling and shouting. The older mammoths were beginning to pair up. Some had already had their mates for many years. The young mammoth had already spotted the unattached females. He made his way toward one of them. He called gently, but she did not respond. He called again. This time, his call was heard by another young male who threw out a challenge. The young mammoth charged at his opponent. At the same time, the other young mammoth came toward him. The two retreated and charged again, trumpeting loudly. After numerous attacks, the young mammoths were exhausted. The challenger was ready to give up. But the young mammoth knew there had to be a winner. He called loudly to his opponent that he was challenging again. Snorting loudly, their small tusks became locked in conflict again. The young mammoth fought, but was soon wounded by his opponent. He was weakened, and he withdrew. He knew he had to look for another female quickly. He watched a female pulling leaves from a tree. He moved gently toward her. Within earshot, he let out a quiet, friendly call. so that he did not attract the attention of other males. There was no challenge. He moved closer toward the young female. He trumpeted gently. She answered his call. The two mammoths stayed together until it was time to mate. They ate their fill from the willows and munched contentedly on the small shrubs.